Hello, I'm Rob, welcome to Rob's Models, and today you're going to be having a look at my build. It's a kind of a summary review following my earlier review of this, which is Tamiya's 1/72 scale Lockheed Martin F-16CJ Block 50, and that's the Fighting Falcon by Lockheed Martin. And yeah, it's a nice little kit. It is quite a little kit, and as you can probably see, I've actually decided to try to display it a little bit by putting it on a base here. In fact, if we come, you might see, there we go. So yeah, I've done it in flight. That wasn't going to be the initial plan, but as I was going through things, I ended up changing bits. Now I've got to say, from the kit's point of view, this is a great kit. I made, to put it bluntly, a couple of cock-ups on here, which I do feel quite bad about, and I have not done this justice at all. So bear that in mind, I am fully aware of that. So before you start mashing down the unlike button, because it's not done absolutely perfectly, I'm fully aware of that, but I'm admitting this is a bit of a warts and all. Things went wrong, let's just admit they went wrong, and actually explain why it went wrong, so hopefully if you're doing it, it doesn't happen with you. And just give you a bit of an idea, because sometimes it's you learn from mistakes, but if you can learn from someone else's mistakes, that's even better. So fully hands up admitting that one. So before you start going crazy in the comments, yeah, I'm fully aware of that, which is why I sort of changed how I'm displaying it and that sort of thing as well. So let's have a bit of a look. Well, actually, what should I say first of all is the actual kit itself, very, very nicely done. There is some very, very, very fine detail in here, and this is why I'm annoyed about why I sort of haven't got the most out of the kit, because some of that fine detail in there, that recessed detail, is really nice and absolutely shocking. It's almost like what they've done is they've taken a 48 scale kit, fine detail in a 48 scale kit, and actually just shrunk it down. And they probably thought, well, maybe not all of that is going to make it through by the time you get the paint there and, you know, the varnishes and those sort of things on there. But I mean, when you're going through it, I reviewed it and I was impressed, but putting it together, literally things are just falling together. I did use a little bit of filler on there. The filler that I used was, actually we can take it off of here for now. I did put a little bit of filler down on the wing roots, just on the top and the bottom, only a little bit though, and to be honest, if it was 48 scale, wouldn't have bothered. It's just because the details on there, the recessed details, were so fine on there that I just kind of felt like actually there were. One of the things I wish I had done is where I then decided in the process, after I'd been painting it and I'd actually already started weathering, when I decided that I was going to be doing it wheels up, that meant that the gear doors were fitted afterwards. What I wish I had done, I mean, it would have been fine for the gear down open, because you wouldn't sort of, you know, that would be fine, but if I'd known I was doing it gear up, I would have, obviously before painting and weathering, would have closed it all up, and then if necessary used a little bit of filler or anything just to get them in a little bit more. But that's a bit of a regret for that one. So the actual build itself went together very nicely. My problem is once we actually then got onto the painting of the kit, and for that I had actually been using the Vallejo Model Air. Now, one thing I've got to say is, and if you check out my website, I do actually list on robsmodels.co.uk, search for F-16, you'll see the paint codes that I used for these, rework them down to the FS numbers, that sort of thing as well. However, I've got to say, this one which is around the nose definitely is a bit too blue. Definitely, but that's basically where my problems come from. So I've got to say the Vallejo ones are quite nice. They do go down thinly, but I'm not convinced that they're the completely right shades of colour. That is definitely a bit too blue, and that definitely seems a bit too dark. Just my view on it. I do think that should be lightened. If I were to do it again, I would make those adjustments, or maybe not use those Vallejo paints. So what really went wrong? Well, what went wrong was my painting. So I painted, you can see I built this on Twitch, so I was live streaming it. So if you're watching that, you can go back, see some of my older videos on Twitch. But my correction I also put as a separate YouTube video as well, because although I'd worked out on my paint codes, I got them the wrong way around. I painted the bulk of it that blue colour. Got those the wrong way round, and then I had to remove. Now what I could do, I've just basically rubbed it down, but with so much fine recessed detail, I kind of knew if I just rubbed down the surface it would be leaving it in the recessed detail. So I needed to use some isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush, scrubbed away and took off as much as possible, still trying to leave the pre-shading and the primer coat down, and then resprayed. And I think I mainly got away with it, but it's just meaning that some of that pre-shading of course got lost, it got taken off. Of course pre-shading goes over the recessed details as well, so it had the extra layer of paint in those recesses, which means that by the time I got the correct paints down, I just think some of that detail was a little bit lost. Whereas on the bottom, if you actually see, we can actually see I've got quite a lot more, ignoring those gear doors. But when you're looking at sort of like, obviously there's a bit more detail on the bottom. You've got a few more hatches, service points, rivets, where the crew are going to be getting to, and also lighter paint, and the pre-shading stood out a lot better. Whereas on the top, not so much detail in what there was. Pre-shading sort of went, darker paints just wasn't sort of standing out. And of course, because of course, you know, they're not as recessed as what they were, just purely because that extra layer of paint that got put on there and removed, it's just sort of, you know, lost that sharpness. So because of that, then when I started weathering it, of course being lighter, the weathering looked a bit better on the bottom, especially as the pre-shading was sort of showing through a lot more. So in the end I thought I prefer the bottom more, and so instead of actually having it displayed as it was going to be the case with the canopy open, I ended up thinking, well actually if I put the pilot in there, so painted the pilot up, I can close the canopy, close the geared doors, and then made a stand for it. The base I can change, obviously this is more of a more of a prototype type base, but I thought what I can do is I can put it on the base and actually show it actually like this, with the underside uppermost, so it's pulling over. So actually it looks a lot more interesting actually, I think, that way, because it's not the normal way the model is displayed. So what actually draws your eye to it is you can see, and again probably a bit over weathered. I did initially want to do this cleaner, but because of the paint cock up and not being able to have so much detail on the top side, I then ended up having to go for a bit more of a more weathered look, partly because weathering does help cover up those areas. I needed to put a lot more down to try to bring out the details on there. So a lot more weathered than what I'd actually planned for it to be, and therefore what I wanted to do was to sort of show it off a little bit more. And actually I've got to say, it does look a lot more dynamic like this. It doesn't look, I know it's on wobbly, but we'll straighten that up. You can see it, you know, if it's on the shelf, it looks a lot more interesting actually, because to be honest, you don't tend to see models like this in a way, or not as common, shall I say, like this, and you know, inverted in a loop. Of course, what I can do, you know, we can rotate and show off any way we want, but yeah. So on the side, and with the actual stand itself, I'd got basically some acrylic tube. I got this off of eBay. It was about £2.50, so quite expensive for what's basically a little simple bit of tube. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, it was actually good value to create the stand. The paint is on the inside of the tube. What I started with was to basically do it in reverse. I looked at pictures, and it's 12mm tube, and I did bevel the top in a little bit just to help it sort of slot in, so did just rub it down. I wanted to have that sort of effect, and looking at pictures where you've kind of got the glow of the afterburner on, especially if it's pulling up, it would have the afterburner on. So first of all, I sprayed in, I masked around the tube itself and sprayed in a ring of orangey colour. On top of that, I then put down aluminium, so that's the AK Interactive polished aluminium, so that is actually on the inside. So you're kind of building up these layers in reverse. That worked quite well. I then experimented with painting blue on the outside to try to get that sort of that pulse type effect of that blue, but it just didn't seem to work for me, so I wiped that off, so there's no paint on the outside at all. And then also I then put a white, spray down some white, because the silver kind of worked, but I didn't quite have the body to it. So I just found with a little bit of white undercoat, so actually it was the last one because of course we're going in reverse, it just made that polished aluminium just stand out a little bit more. Not right the way down the full length. I'm thinking of cutting this down a little bit, but actually it's quite nice just to have a bit of that clear. And actually I also found as well, putting this in, if I sort of do it at the wrong way, like that, so you've got that clear sort of part there. So we go from nothing to have that silvery effect, and then we've got about half an inch of the afterburner orange. But of course, once that actually takes quite a bit of that colour out, so you just initially have that flame. But what I quite liked is, let's try and get that in roughly straight. I was thinking of gluing it in, but I think actually it kind of has that friction fit, so I will leave it as is. But I quite like the idea of actually having it like this, where you can see the base is here and it's actually flying out off of the base. There we've got it in the inverted one, but of course we can just sort of rotate it round. So that's quite nice doing this sort of displays. You can choose the best angle and have that. But what I quite liked, the idea, is that this could sit on the shelf like so. So that would sit on the shelf there and actually be flying out from the shelf. And you could even use that as a base to put other models on there. So just as an idea, so if that was up on the shelf behind me, that's actually dynamically coming out from the shelf, and putting it in a way that sort of shows off that underside. So in that case, if that was higher up, I could have it a bit more at that angle, so that people coming in will look up onto that underside to see that first. So I think that's actually quite an interesting sort of thing from the kit's point of view. Great kit. I just feel bad that it's me that's let the kit down on this one, and I take full responsibility on that. I kind of lost my patience with the decals and those sort of things as well, because by the time I then put a gloss coat on, put the decals on, the decals just don't seem to want to sit down. And there are some, even though with various applicants they were quite thick, and even with applications of microsole, they still not really bedded down as much as what I want. They were quite thick decals. Often with Tamiya ones they seem thick, but a couple of applications of that they do bed down. They've gone to the contours, but they're still raised. But overall, for 72nd, it is good, loads of detail. To be honest, it's not much more cheaper than the 1:48 scale. And to be honest, it is recent tooling, 2014, so it is very nice. The fit in there is really nice. No one can deny that at all. It's a really nice fit, really nice clear canopy. But yeah, I kind of feel so I let it down. But saying that, for another couple of quid, could have got the 1:48 scale. And if I wasn't deliberately wanting to build something in 72nd scale, I would have actually got the 48 scale one. And I do think, it being quite a small aircraft, the 48 scale wouldn't be a huge amount bigger, but those more finer details that do kind of get lost by the time you put down to be honest, before you start putting that weathering down there, even if I didn't get the paint wrong, you would have had a layer of primer, then you would have had your pre-shading, then you would have had your main paint, then you would have your gloss coat as well. So by the time it comes to actually putting on the weathering to pick out, you can see those recesses are really going to get filled in, and they were very, very fine as well. I think just that one level up to a 48 scale would have just made that finer detail a little bit bigger to really make it pop. But we have got that on the bottom, so yeah, as I say, not my finest work. I'm not the, yeah, I think it's all right. I've done worse, but for me, looking at this, the shades of paint don't seem right. That round the front looks too blue. The grey on the back does look too dark. To be honest, the best part of this is the bottom, the bit that no one ever normally sees. So that's why I kind of wanted to change it round. I'm sure if you were to do it, as long as you don't make those cock-ups and you do justice to the kit, you will get a nice model. But for me, I'm thinking, I do think just going up to something in this, the 48 scale, really would just give it that extra little bit. So I would, if you're looking to do an F-16, I'd probably go for a 48 scale one. But that is partly just due to my clumsiness and me just putting my hand up and saying, I have made mistakes on that, I admit that. if you're doing it, don't, you know, check your paint codes. Don't make those same mistakes that I have. So anyway, I've been Rob. Hope you've enjoyed that. Maybe you might have learnt a little bit yourself from that one. If you've made it yourself, if you're making it, do let me know how you get on. Do hit subscribe. I do appreciate that. If you've enjoyed it, despite it going wrong, do hit the like on there. I do try to do a bit of a what's and all. And yeah, let me know how you get on. Ask any questions in the comments. Let me know how you get on and whether you've made similar sort of mistakes on your builds as well. I've been Rob, happy modelling, and look forward to seeing you soon.